All right, and we'll begin. My name is Andy Saldana. I'm the Executive Director of New York Tech Alliance. We're a nonprofit organization that's driving equity nexus here in New York tech ecosystem. Thank you again so much to everybody who's joined the call and will be joining today. We're so excited to have such a fantastic program put forth for you today. Great conversation with Ennie Lim, the CEO and co-founder of HoneyBee, facilitated by Miha Baldwin of Grasshopper Bank. Before we begin, just a few quick thank yous to everybody who makes this possible, and some housekeeping notes. First of all, if you want to learn more about New York Tech Alliance, please check us out at nytech.org. You can always find our upcoming events at this website. A very special thank you to all of our wonderful annual partners, including Grasshopper Bank, other brands like Eisner, Nation Builder, Propeller Industries, Witham, Work Better, Crown Castle, EY, Google, all doing a tremendous work within the New York tech ecosystem, and great partners for you and your business as well. And then a very special thank you to Grasshopper Bank for helping facilitate this series of programming, highlighting amazing founders of the innovation community. Check them out at grasshopper.bank. A couple of our upcoming events. On Tuesday, November 10th, we're having our November New York Tech Meetup. It's focused on Black women founders, so we encourage you to attend and see some of the amazing Black women founders of the New York tech ecosystem. Live technology demos, followed by networking. On Friday, November 20th, we'll be having a mergers and acquisitions panel led by Paul Ellis. Really fantastic series of programming. Again, Friday, November the 20th is that one. And then Wednesday, December 2nd is our next edition of Founder Spotlights with the founder, Regina Gwynn of Trust Noir. So we hope that you can join us back here at noon on December the 2nd, Wednesday, December the 2nd. And then, as I said before, you can always find our events at nytech.org/r_events. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Miha for introductions and to get things kicked off. Go ahead.
Thanks, Andy. Appreciate it. Hope everybody's doing well. If it's noon where you are, because you're in New York, happy lunch. If it's 9 a.m. as it is for me in Seattle, good morning. I'm really excited for today because I think we're going to be talking about subjects that really matter for individuals. One of the things that we forget as founders is sort of the importance of how our individual employees and co-founders and folks that we work with are dealing with day-to-day sort of financial securities and insecurities. And Ennie has built a company that sort of helps do that. As you know, we keep these very positive. They're really an opportunity for you guys to get involved, to ask questions, to get feedback, hopefully get some tactical advice, and to learn a little bit more about what Ennie is building and how she went about building it. So we break these into three pieces. We'll start by talking about the company and the founder journey. We'll then spend a few minutes sort of diving in around various tactical things and other pieces of information that come up that are interesting. And then we'll sort of end it with things to think about as we go forth in our day. So with that, I'm going to start by passing it off to Ennie for her to both introduce herself and her company. And I'm excited to hear about it. Ennie?
Thank you, Miha, and thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. And so my name is Ennie. I'm CEO and co-founder of HoneyBee. And HoneyBee was really the result of a financial setback that I experienced personally. About a few years ago, I went through a divorce and my credit was negatively impacted. And I found myself in a situation where I just couldn't get access to any affordable credit. So I couldn't even get approved for an apartment. So long story short, I did have to move everything into storage and move back home with my parents in the East Coast in Canada. But it did help me discover this fundamental problem that was happening in the US, which is the payday industry. I came across it because I was looking for access and realized that there is this $90 billion payday industry that's taking advantage of some of the most vulnerable families here in America today. So I reconnected with a friend I knew from college, and he actually came from the lending space. But more interestingly enough, his family used to own restaurants, and every time an employee was faced with an emergency, they would ask his dad for money. And so, as an employer, you just like, okay, well, this is, just for one employee, sure, we'll do that. And once you start lending to one employee, you start having to do that for everyone else. And of course, no employer is ever in the business of, lending money to their employees. And you can only imagine how challenging it is to even collect that money back. And of course, very awkward as well. And so my mom was one of those people where she really relied on, the loan that was given from her boss. And for her personally, it was embarrassing to have to ask your boss for money every year and really rely on that. So we started having discussions with different employers across various different industries and realized that it was happening across the board in manufacturing and food production. But no one was really talking about it, or they found very creative ways to do it. Some of them would just Venmo or PayPal their employees immediately, or some of them did it through gift cards. So, obviously there are tax liabilities tied to lending to your employees. So we knew that there was an issue that was happening in the workplace where employees needed access to emergency cash and they were living paycheck to paycheck. The stats are there. 7 to 10 out of employees live paycheck to paycheck. I think the Financial Health Network recently came out a report saying 67% of Americans are considered financially unhealthy. So, and then nonprofit industries, more interesting, was they weren't lending to their employees, but they did see a huge spike of employees borrowing against their retirement. So we knew that there was a way we could solve this problem through the employer channel. So today we are a certified benefit corporation. And what we really do is we provide a rainy day coverage for the workforce. Employers have been providing vision, dental, medical for a very long time, but why aren't we looking at financial health the same way? So with our rainy day coverage, it is employer sponsored and employees get access to 0% emergency funds at any time. And in addition, they get access to bilingual financial counselors on demand. So that's what we do in a nutshell at HoneyBee.
That's awesome. So was that what you set out to do, like to create these rainy day funds for employers when you started, or did you start with a different idea and then move on from there?
I think there was a need for the workplace where employees needed access to emergency funds. So initially, this started off like we should provide low-cost emergency funds to employees. And for us, it was really important to be mission aligned with the employees themselves. So not basing the revenue off the amount of time the employees would borrow, but really making sure that they have that peace of mind and making sure it's access whenever they want at no cost. So it really was the intention from the very beginning, is that there should be a coverage for the workforce.
Awesome. And so how did you go about and validate the idea? Like, what were the first steps you took to see whether this was something employers were into?
Yes, validating the idea is always the most difficult part. You always have to go through trial and error when you're starting out with a product and you have no customers, and to get that first customer is extremely challenging. So to be completely honest, it was just me going out there, talking to employers, literally knocking on doors. I would usually be like buzzing their employer's door and asking them if I could talk to somebody in HR. And funny enough, one of our first customers, of course, as founders, we are very poor. And so I was under Medi-Cal. So I had to go to a clinic that was out in the Bay Area that was for underserved communities. And then I started talking to the doctors there. And as I had an appointment, and asking them if, getting them cash or emergency access is something that they were looking for. So a lot of the nurses started talking about how they had, a lot of struggles with payday loans, and they had about $17,000 in payday loans and didn't know how to get out of it. So strangely enough, they were, as a patient, they were also one of our first customers. So it's always the most difficult to get that first customer to embrace this program, but slowly and surely we did get more and more customers along the way through word of mouth and just, I guess, me just knocking on doors.
And I think it's always a good lesson to learn that you never know where your customers are going to come from, right? So you start with the people you know and sort of work out from there. Are most of your customers, what do your customers look like? Are they primarily doctors' offices, restaurants, and small businesses, or are they tech companies and other types of organizations as well?
Yeah, so what I guess when we started out, the way you look at payday loan stores, they're all disproportionately located heavily in African American and Latino neighborhoods. And that's where we started out. And that's where the first few customers came out of. It was manufacturing, food production, agriculture, healthcare, and nonprofits. So I would say most of our customers today happen to be nonprofits, and we do have a portion of software companies and food production and manufacturing as well. So I think like a big portion of it happened to be, nonprofits, because they're naturally in the business of ethics and they work closely with their employees. A lot of their employees have worked at a nonprofit because they're not in it for the salary, but they're in it for the mission. And so there was a clear mission alignment there. So that's really where we started out. And it's clear and demonstrated, especially during this pandemic, that nonprofits have really embraced us.
So, and then you brought up the pandemic, and so how did COVID affect your business? And did you find that more people were looking for financial support from their employers? Obviously, many employers sort of hit a wall with COVID. Sort of, how'd your business do during this time?
Well, COVID presented a few interesting facts, right? So about 46 million Americans have wiped out their emergency savings due to COVID-19. And so a few things were happening. So employers were cutting budget. So they were concerned what was going to happen this year. So they started cutting budget. But what was interesting is that employers that had us did a survey with their employees and asked, like, what are the top benefits that you want to keep? And we always came up at the top two right after paid time off, actually. And so there was a clear need for our program because 1 out of 5 employees or households was losing an income earner. So there was definitely a need for emergency cash because there was a lot of employees dealing with mental health, unfortunately, because someone in their household had lost a job. So the need was there. I think it was just a matter of like employers had to cut budget. And then now they were looking at what are the top priorities, right? So financial health became a top priority for a lot of employers during this pandemic. So as terrible as this pandemic has been for so many people, it did highlight the issue for us. And I mean, we've been doing it for about 4 years, but it took a pandemic for everyone to realize like, oh, I think our employees need access to financial health programs. And so I'm thankful that they're starting to look at that more seriously. And so it actually has helped us highlight our issues.
Awesome. And so talk a little bit, you talk about what's interesting is the primary product is this lending product for employers to their employees. But you talk about financial health, right? And I imagine financial health is a little bit more than an emergency fund when needed. There's education and other things that are necessary to help somebody be better with their money or to understand how that works. Are you guys providing educational programs as well?
So we provide a one-on-one financial counseling because everybody walks through very different financial journeys. Some people want to buy a house, some people are dealing with medical debt or bankruptcy. So we want to make sure that there is a counselor that's going to be there to walk you through like the goals that you want to achieve. So in terms of like education, we provide these webinars for employers. And it's a series of webinars. It could be financial wellness 101. It could be student loan repayment, retirement savings, and how you should really start looking at retirement savings, because a lot of millennials, they have that offer through their employer, but a lot of people don't take advantage of it, unfortunately. So we provide that informational webinar and the one-on-one financial counseling.
And if I'm an employer, what is the question I should ask, or the action I should take to find out if my employees are in need of financial support and we should use a product like yours?
So there's interesting questions that you can ask. Despite finances being the top of workplace stress, 2 out of 3 people would rather talk about weight than money, and nobody likes to talk about weight, right? So so what's interesting is unless their employees are talking about it, it's really difficult for employers to discover the pain point. But there are a few key things you can look at. You can look at your retirement savings, like how many employees are taking advantage of your 401k and how many of them are participating. So that is usually the number one factor that we look at. And most of the time, there is a huge spike in borrowing against their retirement. There's people asking for hardship withdrawals. So already immediately, you know that employees need help financially and need access to some financial education. And I think overall, why haven't we prioritized this along with, access to medical, vision, dental? And so, employers have no issues buying snacks for their employees, but why can't you pay that same cost to make sure that they are financially well and access to emergency funds? But that is, that's the journey that we have to take to make sure that employers prioritize this. It's not something we've often talked about. So that's why we have to ask those questions. And the number one question is going to be, how many of your employees have borrowed against their retirement savings? Because that's usually pretty evident.
Thank you. We have a question from the audience, which is, are you a technical founder? I guess that's question one.
Mm-hmm.
Are you technical?
Yeah. So I do not have, we have a technical founder and I am not one of those.
Got it. Can you share your initial ideas versus reality on the technical aspects of building out your vision? And I guess not being technical, the way I would answer that question or ask that question is sort of, what are the technical roadblocks that you saw in sort of implementing this product? Is it highly technical? Is it a platform that people are signing up for? How much of technology and software went into building this thing out?
Well, we have a great team that develops the product for us, but essentially our goal was to make sure that the user experience was really seamless. And so they can get access to emergency funds within a minute of the application. It is quick application. Imagine going to anywhere else to get access to the funds. If you go to trying to borrow something about $1,000 and you're trying to apply for a loan, that is a long process. And so we've been able to make it extremely seamless. And then our goal was to make it as easy as possible so that it is, and also we don't do any payroll integration with employers. That's actually a key factor that I should mention. We can roll it out within a single day with any employers. All we do is provide this company code and everything's done on our end. So we wanted to make it as seamless as possible. So that is the experience that the employees get today. And we make it really simple for employers to bring us on board. So I would say that I have to thank my team for making this process extremely seamless for the user.
And I imagine that you've heard some good stories about how people have used your product. Have you heard anything that sort of, when did you know you were on the right track, I guess is the question. Like when did you hear something from a user or from a customer that sort of made it clear that you built the right thing for the right audience?
So we implemented a really interesting piece into after the employees, submit an application for an emergency fund, that at the end they could put a thank you note for HR. And I think it's really important to always, tell the HR what a great job they did implementing this program and what value they've brought to the organization. So there's always this thank you note that's written by every employee after they submit an application. And we get all kinds of notes every day is this has helped me feed my family. This has helped me get access to the emergency funds I needed for a car repair. So we get those notes actually every day on a daily basis. And that's really important information that we have to send to the organization. So they have a better idea of, how much this program is valued by their employees.
Got it. And how do you continually engage with your customers? Like, how do you get feedback from your customers and iterate your product?
Getting customers' feedback is always really important. We have a customer service team that speaks to them all the time and always ask them about, what could be improved. And it's really important to understand what they're looking for and make it to continuously improve our product. So we're always talking to our customers.
Awesome. Another question. What about, do companies have to have 401k to use your product? Or how do you?
Not.
They do not. And so are there other ways to tell whether your product is useful for a company other than sort of withdrawals from 401k? Like what kind of, I guess the question that sort of comes to mind is, how do you teach employers to have a financial health conversation with their employees?
I think the most important is, and then this is, there's such a taboo tied around talking about money. I always suggest that it's really important, especially when we onboard like a new customer, is for HR to share an experience about their own financial health and how they've overcome the obstacles. And that's how we've done it in our own organization. I've been really open about my financial setbacks, and I've made sure that our executive team also does the same so that our employees can really feel safe. You have to really create a safe environment to talk about your financial health. And we definitely don't do that in our culture because it is taboo to talk about anything financially related, and nobody ever wants to talk about their debt either. But if we don't talk about it, how are we going to make the improvements? How do you know that your peer is going through it? So I would highly recommend that, the executive team really embrace and talk about like some of the challenges they face and how they've overcome it. And we do that a lot in our calls, and we ask these questions to HR. And I can tell you every single person has a story. So we like to share stories. I think it's the most authentic way to bring a safe environment to talk about financial stress.
So, and what pushback do you get from companies about employing the product? Do companies sort of not believe it is necessary? Do they think it's too expensive? Do they think their employees shouldn't lend from them? How does it work?
So there's always going to be employers that think the financial situations of their employees is really none of their business. But it definitely becomes your business when it affects your bottom line. There are countless studies that shows that financial stress trickles into the workplace. It affects mental health, productivity, engagement. I'll just give you an example. So we had a mom, she's 48. She was a nurse and medical assistant at one of the organizations we partnered with. And she travels about 2 hours to work every day. A lot of people travel a lot to work every day. Well, in our situation, we're all virtual, but still there's a lot of frontline workers that have to travel to work, to attend to their, customers and some of their patients. So one day her car breaks down. She has no access to credit or cash. She has a 540 FICO score, so you can only imagine, where her alternatives are. She actually had to miss an entire week of work trying to get money. She asked friends and family, and meanwhile, her employer had to make sure that her colleagues covered her shift, and so they actually had to work overtime. So she was desperate for cash. She finally went to a payday lender because she had to get back to work. So there's no question that financial stress trickles into the workplace. And I've heard stories where employees couldn't get to work because the gas price went up. So for employers to think that financial stress doesn't trickle into the workplace, there are just countless studies that show that. And you can only imagine if you're at work and you're trying to figure out how to pay for, something that needs repair or your kids' meals, it's really hard for you to focus at work.
Yeah, I can imagine. And I mean, I shouldn't say I can imagine, I can say that I've experienced, right? Like I think I would bet that there is very few people that haven't gone through some sort of financial stress in their life.
Mm-hmm. Would you like to share your story, Miha?
So sure. I mean, which story? I have many. I also at one point moved back in with my parents and then lived with them for a year. I was 29, I think, at the time, which is a little old to be living with your family, and commuted 40 plus minutes. I lived in the Bay Area. My parents lived in San Jose, and I was working at a company in Emeryville, which was like a 40-minute drive on a good day. On a bad day, it was probably 2 hours. And so commuted every day from my parents' house to work at this company, but had no money, like ran out of all cash, had a company, it crashed and burned, and was completely out of cash. And so I had to move back with my parents for a little while and then find a job and work for a while. And so, so I think part of that is the standard founder story, right? Like every founder goes through a point where the company's about to run out of money. They have no money. They're living on credit cards, right? They're trying to figure it out. Like it's very rare that somebody figures it all out, like raises money, never has to worry about cash on the founder side. And I think individuals deal with money too. And you talk about mental health, one of the byproducts of many mental health issues is spending, right? Is actually one of the things I found really interesting is that one of the ways that people self-sabotage themselves is by overspending, right? So it's not always hurting you by cutting yourself or doing other things. Sometimes you just spend a whole lot of money. And I definitely have done that quite a bit in my life. And I think a lot now about kind of retirement and like those sort of things. And am I in the right place for it? And think about a lot of the money that I've spent over the years that I probably shouldn't have, put myself into positions that are less optimal than they could be. And I don't think that's unique. I think everybody goes through a period of time where money is an issue. And if you're worried about money, like you said, you can't work, like your production goes down, you're not going to do as well. And so I think building a product that sort of helps alleviate that issue. And I say that too, because I worked on building a company for a little while that was sort of around the same idea. It wasn't employer lending to employee, which I think is a brilliant idea. It was more about friends lending to friends.
Mm-hmm.
Like in a lot of immigrant communities, they'll collect cash for somebody who's coming into the US and sort of give them a pile of cash and say, here you go. And so it's sort of along those lines. So I do really think strongly that there's this idea of people helping people. And I like the idea of employers helping employees, which really brings me to a couple other thoughts that I'm going to bring up. And there's a question there's a couple questions in the chat that I'm going to ask before I get into my stuff. So one of the things that I'm interested in is sort of what's the model? Like if the employer is lending at zero interest, is the money coming from the employer to lend? Are you guys giving the money to lend? Like what's
So we
the model?
provide all of the capital to lend out. And so the best way to think about it is if you look at any insurance product out there, employers cover if you look at Aflac, for example, they essentially provide supplemental insurance for any medical expenses, and the employers sponsor a premium, and the employees get full access to the program. So you have to really look at it as the same way. So we've kind of figured out a model where, depending on the industry, state that you're in, number of employees, word count, full-time, part-time, we look at all of those factors, and we roughly determine the cost for the employee, but it's going to vary between $7 to $10 per employee per month. And the entire workforce gets access to emergency funds anytime, as well as our counselor. And so we assess all of that risk. We absorb all of that risk ourselves, but essentially that's what the model is.
Awesome. And then question from the audience was sort of the opposite. We talked about how do you convince employers to sign up? How can employees convince their bosses to sign up for your program?
That's challenging. We've actually tried that strategy very early on because we understood that employees need it. I used to go to these YMCAs and started talking to all of these employees, and the employees would say like, oh, I would love to have this. And so I would ask them, could you encourage maybe your C-level to look at a program like this? And this goes back to the taboo around financial health. There's a there's shame that is tied to, money and debt. So a lot of them were too embarrassed to even ask. They're like, oh, I don't want to be the one to ask, because then I'm going to look like I'm the person that needs it. But that's actually very difficult to do. We tried to do that to see if employees were willing to bring it up to the C-level and HR. And unfortunately, a lot of people still has a lot of shame around it and they don't want to do it. So that is, just part of that stigma that we have to destigmatize.
And am I right? Are you a B Corp?
Yes, we are.
Can you walk through the decision? First of all, can you describe what a B Corp is? And then second of all, can you walk through the decision about why you decided to become a B Corp?
Yeah, so being a certified benefit corporation requires us to balance purpose and profit for all of our stakeholders. So that is investor, our customer, the employers, our team. And also we get to be part of a community of leaders that is driving, global movement of people using business as a force for good. So I really wanted to be part of this community. There's about 2,200, I think 2,400 now certified B Corps around the globe. And so we're really proud to be part of that community. And for us is to really demonstrate transparency and what our mission was. And so we are, it really just comes down to balancing purpose and profit. And I really wanted to be transparent with employers that we spoke to that this is what we are and we're in it to help your employees. And so we're balanced and we are required to balance purpose and profit, just becoming a certified benefit corporation. And so I've actually known about certified B Corps for a very long time. I've always, always been in the impact space, worked at different nonprofits. And so I knew how important it was just to be part of that community.
And so what are the requirements to be a B Corp? Like, what do you have to do?
Yeah, so there is a very lengthy B Lab, which is part of the B Corp that assess everything from environment and diversity and inclusion, financial health. So there's various different categories that you have to answer, and it's a very long assessment that you have to take. And after you take that assessment, you get a score of whether or not you can be a B Corp. And if you're providing it for, some of them are doing it for environmental reasons, some of them are doing to address inequality. And so once you do that, after 2 years, you have to become a benefit corporation. So officially.
Awesome. And are you required to file anything with the IRS, or do you get tax breaks, or what's the benefit to the company for being a B Corp?
Unfortunately, you don't get any tax breaks. So honestly, the benefit of being a certified benefit corporation is really just to be part of that community.
Awesome. Very good. So let's talk a little bit about some tactical things that you've done that maybe were mistakes that you've learned. What do you think has driven your success to date? Like what tactic have you employed that you're proud of in sort of building the company?
Well, we've made a million mistakes, but we'll have to save a whole other podcast for that. But essentially, what I'm most proud of is really the authentic desire to share a story. And that's really how we started, was just, my co-founders shared their personal story. I shared mine about my own financial setbacks. And it got a lot of people to open up. You opened up today about your financial struggles. And so that's how it starts, really the authentic desire to share a story. We were able to not only bring on customers that understood, the struggle that their employees might be going through and they should start to address it, but also hiring was really great because I shared my story and wanted to make sure that the people that came on to our team was really part of this mission and the bigger vision of making sure that we can turn a simple idea from a struggle that I went through to eventually a movement where we can start to destigmatize financial health support in the workplace and provide safety net for all working Americans. So I would say that is what I'm most proud of, is really authenticity within our team and within our product and with all of our customers.
Talk a little bit about hiring, because hiring is such an important part of being a CEO. how did you use authenticity and vulnerability to attract the right kind of people? Like, I guess the question is, as you went to look for individuals to join your team, how did you make sure that they were culture adds and that they fit the overall mission of your business?
That's always really challenging when you're trying to hire someone. But I think the main question that I have for them during the interview is share a financial setback that you have been through and how did you overcome it? And what are you hoping to get by working, for a company like HoneyBee? And you can tell just by that question and how authentic and vulnerable they're willing to get. And so that's when you know that, they've gone through their fair share of struggles and they understand like the issue that we're trying to address here. It is a big issue. And so that's the first question that I would ask them on top of obviously all of their experiences and depending on what role it is, if their skill sets fit that. But essentially that is a very important question that I do ask.
Do you think that remote work makes authenticity more difficult or easier?
There's been a lot of talk about this new culture of remote working, and I think that's one of the things that I had to implement fairly quickly. Is we all had to move work to a work at home culture very quickly, and we will be remotely working from home permanently. So it's this new culture that we had to instill, and I think you could have that same level of authenticity. Our team has actually become a lot closer during this pandemic than we've ever been before. I think before we were in the office, but we weren't necessarily all talking to each other. And today they have to all get on a team meeting together. We have to, share our updates, but also I try to make sure that, on Fridays, somebody else takes a turn to share something they want to share about. It could be a game they want to play, a topic they're interested in. And you open up about, who that person is. And I think we've actually gotten a lot closer during this pandemic, strangely enough.
Awesome. So my friend Emily, we talked to her last month, and she's a clinical psychologist. And one of the things she talked about was the importance of play in the workplace. And it's interesting you talked about games that people would want to play. Could you talk a little bit more about maybe how you institute a culture of play in your organization?
Yeah, so I think it just takes, we started off where everyone kind of shared a topic, and I wanted to make sure that they could be more playful. So one of our employees just showed up one day. It's like, we're going to play a game. And actually, that was actually the most common thing we started doing on a Friday is that we started playing a game. My co-founder had hosted riddles, and we can tell who definitely thinks outside the box. And so it's a lot of fun. And I think it just takes, one person to say, I'm going to play a game today. I'm not going to share a specific topic, but it really just started that way. And I think people feel a lot closer and they feel safer to be able to be playful than rather than just always talking about work.
So another thought that sort of comes to mind, to change topic a little bit, but thinking around remote, is most of your customers are sort of small to medium businesses or medium enterprises, right? Like you're not targeting the Amazons of the world. You're looking at smaller companies.
Yeah, so we're targeting very like mid-market employers.
Yeah.
So we have employers that are, 50 to 2,000 employees. And the reason that we started off there, and I feel like the mid-market's been highly overlooked, and the reason we are able to do that very quickly and efficiently is because we're a quick turnkey solution for employers where they don't have to integrate with payroll, and they're just quick and they are able to just do it within a single day. You can only imagine the amount of HR paperwork they have to deal with already, and saying that you have to integrate with payroll is a huge pain for them. And so for them to be able to be empowered and say, I can just roll this out within the next day, it's huge for HR.
How are you managing sales in a remote world?
Managing sales in a remote world would be exactly the same as if we were in the office. And putting a process together is key. One of my co-founder, Max, has put a very a specific process together to make sure that it's as efficient as possible. He's a product guy and a tools guy, so he's been really good at that. And so it just works seamlessly. So our goal is just to replicate that constantly. So the process has been put in place, and it's taken a while to get here. But once you have that put in place, we're really confident we can just replicate that sales process. And it's just about hiring the right people that's able to be part of that team.
So most of your sales now, I guess, then have traditionally been outbound calls, like not knocking on doors as much now that you're going after the
Yeah. Wouldn't be really scalable if I was still knocking on doors. But no, and right now it is a combination of, marketing brings in a lot of inbounds, me sharing my story on, great panels like this. And so also we definitely have a very specific, customer profile that we're targeting also. And that's what the sales teams focus on.
Sort of a bit of a shift is back to kind of culture and working with your team. How do you empower your team?
How do you empower your team? So that's an interesting one. And it's also it also took us a while to get here. I think really important is that we do give a flexibility of, we're really looking for entrepreneurs in their own, right? So for them to come into HoneyBee and really figure out if something's not going wrong, trying to figure it out. Part of our core values is never stop learning. And we're all here to help each other collaboratively. And that's why we get on these calls, so that we can share some of the challenges we're facing and how can somebody else on the team help out. So really empower them to trying to think independently and outside of the box, and like, what else could we do to solve this problem? So you have to allow them to make their mistakes and also learn from it and fix it.
And do you so talking about fixing things, so when there's a problem in the organization, does everybody have a voice to be able to talk about potential solutions to that problem? Do you have people sort of, and I hate to say it this way, but sort of stick to their lanes, like the things that they're good at? Like, how do you get people to, because you're a small company, so how do you get people to be involved in the overall vision and growth of the business?
I think as we scale, that's going to be a lot more challenging. But since we're a really small team today, we are able to do that. And I encourage everyone to share their voices and like their opinions. And so I never want anyone to feel like their opinion doesn't matter and they're afraid to speak up and share, a solution that they might have. Otherwise, you can't help them grow. And I think like one of my key role as a CEO is to make sure that you put people in place that are responsible for the results. And if you can empower them to make their own decisions, then that's not the culture that we're trying to build. And I want to make sure that everybody does have a voice, regardless of where you are in the company.
Awesome. So along those lines, we talked a little bit about one of your favorite questions. You asked about financial struggles in the interview. Do you ask other questions that sort of engender understanding around whether they're entrepreneurial or whether they're willing to speak up? Do you have any suggestions on interview questions that are good around those things?
So one of the key factors that I look for, obviously diversity and inclusion is really important to me. And we have ways to go to try to, in tech in general, to try to solve that issue. And I try not to get referrals from people because, in order to expand your network, you really have to go out and source, different types of candidates. Because for a long time, I always had the same candidates that, showed up and came through my email, and all of these applications were just the same people. And so I wanted to go out and expand that network. So I used to search on LinkedIn myself and try to look for those individuals. And so luckily, like some of those individuals today are some of our best employees. And so for me, number one, diversity is really important. Someone from a different background that might not have been in fintech, but could have been from a different industry is really important. But like, I'm looking for work ethics. We're a startup. We haven't figured it all out. It's a series of problem solving every day, and you have to look for a problem solver. So I'm looking for strong work ethics, and usually you can tell just by, asking them different questions about their last workplace and what they did over there to overcome challenges, what their goals are, and in addition to, of course, why does HoneyBee's mission, really resonates with you. But those are all the questions that we look for. And we also have some case studies, right? You have to imagine, are they willing to put in the work to be here and part of this interview? And if they're too lazy to do that, they're just gonna be filtered out. So those are a few things that we've put in place to try to find the right candidates. And hiring is always going to be very difficult.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, hiring's tough, right? It's probably the toughest thing to do as a founder, because you're selling your idea and your vision, but you haven't gotten there yet. So you're also selling hope,
Yeah.
And that always is a hard thing to do. Tell me what is one of the greatest challenges that you've faced? No, actually, let's not go down there. If you weren't doing HoneyBee, what would you do?
If I wasn't doing HoneyBee, what would I be doing? To be completely honest, being part of this startup and seeing how many people, and especially women, have shared their experiences with me and have been really open about, my financial setback after my divorce, I realized there's so much fear for so many women to open up about their finances. And I would definitely want to advocate for, be open about talking about money in the workplace. So I don't know to what level that is. Maybe it's a nonprofit, maybe it's an advocacy group, but essentially that's become a huge passion of mine, to really destigmatize like talking about money with women. I have so many friends that have reached out to me personally and asked me, what should I do now? I'm potentially going to get divorced. I'm scared. And so there's a lot of women that are afraid to take that step, and they think that, the world will fall apart. And it will, just for a little bit, but you'll pick yourself up and you'll be a lot more resilient. Women are extremely resilient human beings. So I just want to be able to empower that.
And you're doing it, right? Like through your company now, which is great.
Yeah. And I hope that, that it could scale so that we can really, get people to really address financial health firsthand.
What is your barrier to scaling right now?
What's my barrier to scale? So I would say, well, I think we're on the right track, to be completely honest. And we're definitely on the right track to get there. I think we had to figure out a lot of things along this way. And then this pandemic was going to be a demonstration of, are employers going to really start prioritizing financial health in the workplace? And they have.
What so as we sort of come up here in our last 5 or 6 minutes, I always like to ask a few questions that are more, I guess, about you than about the business. I read an article that you like to give every new employee a couple books. What are those books and why?
So a few books. I think I read a lot of books, and a lot of Audible books. I read a lot about a founder's journey, but there's a couple of things. So one of them is a children's book. It's called What are you going to do with an idea? And so I love children's book because I used to sit on the board of a early financial literacy nonprofit. And these children's books teach a very valuable lesson. And so in this book, this child, has this idea, but he doesn't know what to do with it. And he's like, oh, I'll just put it away. But once he, nurtured it, at the end of the book, it says like, a simple idea can change the world. And so that's the type of culture I wanted to instill. And then, well, everybody loves having a children's book, but everybody signs the book when a new employee joins. And I think it's really important to instill that there is so much possibility that comes from a simple idea. And so the other book is Emotional Intelligence 2.0. And it is so key to have, not all of us have, strong EQ, but we can work on it. And it's a work in progress. Like, I have employees to make sure you take that test like every year and see if you improve on your emotional intelligence. And I think that is one of the 2 books that I provide for my employees.
That's awesome. What's the best thing that's happened to you in the last week?
The best thing that's happened to me in the last week. I got to talk to this woman. She's an extremely, authentic, but also powerful woman in the tech industry. And I had read her book also, and she took the time off like her Saturday night after dinner to call me to hear more about HoneyBee. And I'm so in awe of that because, she's as busy as she is, like she still took the time to have a conversation with me. And I hope I can do that, in the future for a lot of people. Really take that time to listen to other people's story and see how you can help them. And so I'm really humbled by it. So I think I would have to say that's the best thing that happened to me this week.
It's pretty cool. What
Yeah.
do you think that, do you think you have the same ability to offer that inspiration to others?
I hope so. I do it within my own personal network. I know friends have reached out and asked for help in financially and asked for thoughts and feedback about their career. But I'm still at the beginning stage of building this company. We're still learning every day, but I hope that, and I will be able to provide, mentorship when the time is right and when I feel like I can provide value.
How do you celebrate success?
I feel like success is more of an, when you say success, it's an end journey. I know this is very cliche, but I really feel that, failure is part of success, and you just have to overcome, once you fail, like figure it out and pick yourself up and brush yourself off and, go at it again. And it's about really putting like 110% of yourself in it every day. So I don't know that it's a series of problem solving. I think I celebrate moments. I don't know if it's success, but I celebrate moments when great things have happened, and I take the time to do that.
What about the opposite? How do you celebrate failure?
You sulk for about a day. So I think you got to take a step back and just try to figure out what are the mistakes you made and how can you learn from it and how could you be better. And so this pandemic is really going to demonstrate the companies that are going to be post-COVID companies, and they're going to be more resilient and better for it. And I hope that, and I'm pretty sure we'll be one of those companies. So I think it's really important, like when your back's against the wall, when this pandemic has hit, you're uncertain of what was going to happen. So just problem solve and really put in the hard work. I think that's really important.
Awesome. And then my last question is, we've spent an hour together. What's one thing you want to make sure that everybody listening leaves with?
I would say, don't give up on an idea. And when it sounds crazy and everyone thinks you're crazy, I don't think I set out to try to disrupt this payday loan industry, which is, a powerful industry in the US. But, it's a series of problem solving, right? And it's always about, think about the mission, and does your mission matter? And if it really does, then don't give up on it.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much
I think
for having me.
You're welcome. I think we learned a lot. Definitely love the stuff you talked about around hiring. Lots of tactical things there for people to pull out. Life is a series of problem solving. So I think that's wonderful. I'm going to turn it back over to Andy to wrap it up. And thanks again.
Thank you.
And Jacqueline, there will be a recording available.
Yes, hi everyone. Thank you so much for that great conversation, Miha and Ennie. It was so wonderful to hear your perspectives and on such an important concept. Again, thank you to everyone who attended today's event. You should see the slide with all of our contact information. Please please feel free to connect with any of us. And you can watch the past conversations on our website on the Grasshopper page. So we encourage you to check those out as well. Such an amazing group of founders. It's again a pleasure to have you as part of this conversation, and good luck on your journey and everything that you have in your future. If you need anything from us, please feel free to reach out. And we encourage anybody in the audience to reach out to either Miha at Grasshopper Bank, Ennie Lim, the founder of HoneyBee, and myself, Executive Director of New York Tech Alliance. We're always here to help however we can. We hope you have a fantastic afternoon. And again, thank you so much. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.